Tonight I'm taking your husband, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you're brave enough to stop me. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. I am James Peter, your temporary host, and I have no words to describe the love I've received from you in these 10 days. You are the most beautiful, loyal, and loving family, and I cherish each one of you with all my heart. Before we begin, let me say a special prayer for my family. Heavenly Father, I come before you today with a heart full of gratitude for this beautiful family you have blessed me with. Each soul listening to my voice is precious, and I ask you to pour your endless love upon them. May their days be filled with peace, their hearts with joy, and their homes with laughter. If any of them are carrying burdens, lighten their load. If any are feeling lost, guide them with your light. If any are in pain, wrap them in your healing embrace. Bless their families, their dreams, and their journeys ahead. Let love always surround them, and may they find comfort knowing they are never alone. You are always with them, and so am I. In your holy and precious name I pray. Amen. Now, my beautiful family, are you ready? Because today's story is going to be more powerful than ever. Don't skip any part. It will touch your heart, and Chapter 11 will truly surprise you. Let's begin this journey together. With love. Chapter 1. A new position. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble lobby of Summit Enterprises as Polly Daphne stepped through the revolving doors. Her charcoal suit was pressed to perfection, her portfolio tucked securely under her arm. Despite the confidence in her stride, her heart pounded against her ribs. This opportunity at one of the city's most prestigious financial firms represented everything she had worked toward. Deep breaths, she whispered to herself, approaching the reception desk where a woman with a practiced smile greeted her. Polly Daphne for my first day in financial analysis, she announced, her voice steadier than she felt. Welcome to Summit Enterprises, Ms. Daphne. Please take a seat. Someone will be down shortly to escort you upstairs. The lobby buzzed with activity. Men and women in tailored suits moved with purpose, their conversations a soft murmur beneath the classical music playing through hidden speakers. Polly observed everything, absorbing the environment that would now be part of her daily life. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a woman whose presence immediately commanded attention. Her platinum blonde hair was swept into an immaculate chignon, not a single strand out of place. Her navy dress hugged her slender figure with precision, and diamond studs glinted at her ears, subtle yet unmistakably expensive. Miss Daphne. The woman's smile was professional but did not reach her ice-blue eyes. I'm Leora Lurie, Mr. Summit's personal secretary. I'll be handling your orientation today. Polly rose to her feet, extending her hand. Pleased to meet you, Miss Lurie. I appreciate you taking the time. Leora's handshake was firm to the point of discomfort, her nails perfectly manicured in a pale pink. The pleasure is mine. Mr. Summit expects all new hires to understand our standards from day one. Her gaze swept over Polly's attire with a subtle assessment that felt like judgment. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was silent, save for Leora's brief description of the company's history, facts Polly had already memorized during her preparation for the interview. When they arrived, Leora led her through a maze of glass offices and open workspaces. Financial analysis is through here, Leora gestured to a section of the floor where analysts worked at sleek computer stations. Your desk is the third one in the second row. Your department head, Mr. Finch, will brief you on your specific responsibilities. As they passed an expansive corner office, Leora paused. That's Mr. Summit's office. He doesn't typically interact with new analysts, so don't expect to see much of him. The slight emphasis on new carried a clear message. Polly was low in the hierarchy, and Leora stood at its peak. I understand, Polly replied evenly. I'm here to earn my place through my work. Something flickered across Leora's perfectly composed features, perhaps surprise at Polly's composure, or irritation at her lack of intimidation. Yes, well, Leora continued, leading her to human resources, not everyone adjusts well to our culture here at Summit. The demands are significant. The orientation was comprehensive but cold. Leora introduced her to key personnel with efficient brevity, handed her a thick binder of company policies, and scheduled mandatory training sessions with an almost mechanical precision. By midday, Polly's head swam with information, but her determination remained unshaken. "This is Mr. Finch, your direct supervisor," Leora introduced a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "He'll take over from here." "Welcome aboard, Ms. Daphne," Mr. Finch said warmly, his handshake genuine. "Your credentials are impressive. We have high hopes for you." "Thank you, sir. I'm eager to begin." As Mr. Finch began explaining her first assignment, the atmosphere shifted. Employees straightened in their seats, conversations hushed, and eyes turned toward the main corridor. A tall man with broad shoulders and salt-and-pepper hair strode purposefully through the office. His custom-tailored suit spoke of wealth, but it was his commanding presence that defined him as Liam Summit. "Ah, Mr. Summit," Finch said, clearly surprised. "Did you need something, sir?" "Just checking on our new talent, Finch." His voice was deep and assured. "You mentioned we had a promising new analyst starting today." Leora materialized at his side instantly. "Mr. Summit, I was going to brief you on the new hires this afternoon. There's no need to concern yourself personally." Summit's expression remained pleasant, but his tone carried unmistakable authority. "I always concern myself with promising additions to our team, Leora." He turned to Polly, extending his hand. "Liam Summit, welcome to the company, Miss Daphne, sir. Polly Daphne." She met his firm handshake with equal pressure, maintaining steady eye contact. "Miss Daphne graduated top of her class at Wharton and has already published 2 papers on emerging market analysis," Finch supplied proudly. Summit nodded approvingly. "I read your paper on sustainable investment strategies in developing economies. Insightful work." Polly could not hide her surprise. "You read my paper?" "I make it a point to know what the brightest minds in finance are thinking," he replied with a slight smile. "I look forward to seeing what you bring to Summit Enterprises." From the corner of her eye, Polly noticed Leora's perfect composure fracture momentarily, her fingers tightening around the tablet she held. The secretary quickly recovered, stepping forward. "Mr. Summit, you have a call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. We should prepare." "Of course," he nodded to Polly. "Good luck with your first day, Miss Daphne." As Summit and Leora walked away, Polly heard Leora speaking in hushed tones. Though she couldn't make out the words, the urgent cadence suggested concern, or perhaps warning. "Don't mind Leora," Finch said quietly once they were alone. "She's protective of Mr. Summit's time and attention. Been with him for 5 years now." "I understand," Polly replied, though she sensed there was more to Leora's behavior than professional protectiveness. "Ready to dive in?" Finch asked, gesturing to her workstation. Polly nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Absolutely." As she settled at her desk, she could feel Leora watching her from across the office. The secretary's smile was polite when Polly glanced up, but her eyes remained cold and calculating. In that moment, Polly understood that she had inadvertently made an enemy on her very first day. She turned to her computer, determination replacing any lingering nervousness. She hadn't overcome countless obstacles to be intimidated now. Whatever game Leora Lurie was playing, Polly would not be easily defeated. Chapter 2. Rising Star. Within a month, Polly had established herself as an invaluable asset to the financial analysis department. Her desk, once pristine and impersonal, now displayed a modest collection of research materials and a small potted succulent, her sole concession to decoration in the otherwise sterile environment. "Miss Daphne, these projections are exceptional," Mr. Finch said, reviewing her latest report on his tablet. "Your approach to the Henderson account identifies vulnerabilities our previous analyses missed entirely." Polly nodded, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the pride swelling within her. "Thank you, sir. I noticed inconsistencies in their quarterly statements that suggested potential cash flow problems they've been masking through creative accounting." "Creative indeed," Finch chuckled. "This warrants bringing to Mr. Summit's attention. The quarterly executive meeting is tomorrow morning. I'd like you to present your findings." As Finch walked away, Polly felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Executive meetings were typically reserved for senior analysts. An invitation so early in her tenure was unusual, and precisely the opportunity she needed to establish herself. She worked late into the evening, refining her presentation, anticipating questions, and preparing supplementary materials. The office emptied gradually until only the cleaning staff remained. As she gathered her belongings, satisfied with her preparation, she noticed a shadow in the doorway. "Still here, Miss Daphne." Leora stood there, her expression unreadable. "Burning the midnight oil already?" "Just finalizing some details for tomorrow's presentation," Polly replied, maintaining a cordial tone despite the tension that inevitably arose whenever they interacted. "Ah, yes, the executive meeting." Leora stepped into the office, running a finger across Polly's desk. "I've taken the liberty of rescheduling your presentation. The agenda was simply too crowded." Polly's stomach tightened. "Mr. Finch specifically requested—" "Mr. Finch doesn't manage the executive calendar, Ms. Daphne." "I do." Leora's smile was pleasant, her eyes cold. "Perhaps next quarter." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and your report on the Henderson account? I'll need that on my desk by 8 a.m. for proper filing." Polly maintained her composure until Leora disappeared down the hallway. Then she sank into her chair, frustration threatening to overwhelm her professional resolve. Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone and pulled up Mr. Finch's contact information. The following morning, Polly arrived early, placing her report in Leora's inbox as requested. She then proceeded to her desk, where she found a stack of urgent financial statements requiring immediate analysis, work that would keep her occupied throughout the morning. At 9:15, her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Finch. "Meeting room A, now." Walking briskly to the executive wing, Polly couldn't help but notice Leora's absence from her usual post outside Summit's office. She entered meeting room A to find the executive team assembled around a polished mahogany table. Liam Summit sat at its head while Leora stood near the projection screen, her expression tightly controlled. "Ah, Miss Daphne," Summit greeted her. "We were just discussing your Henderson analysis. Quite the revelation." "I don't understand," Polly said, glancing at Mr. Finch, who nodded encouragingly. "I was informed my presentation had been rescheduled." Summit's eyebrows rose. "Rescheduled? On whose authority?" "There appears to have been a miscommunication," Leora interjected smoothly. "I was attempting to adjust the agenda to accommodate everyone's schedules. Clearly something was lost in translation." "Indeed," Summit replied, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. "Nevertheless, your report speaks for itself, Ms. Daphne. Would you care to walk us through your findings?" Despite the lack of preparation time, Polly delivered a concise analysis of the Henderson account, fielding questions with confidence and precision. Throughout her presentation, she noted Leora in her peripheral vision, ostensibly taking notes but watching Polly with undisguised calculation. When the meeting concluded, Summit approached her. "Impressive work, especially given the scheduling confusion. I'd like you to take the lead on restructuring Henderson's investment strategy." I'd be honored, sir, Polly replied, conscious of Leora hovering nearby. Leora will provide you with access to the necessary resources, he added, turning to his secretary. Of course, Mr. Summit. Leora's tone was professional, betraying none of the annoyance Polly knew she must be feeling. Over the following weeks, Polly's reputation within Summit Enterprises solidified. Her recommendations for the Henderson account proved accurate, saving a valuable client relationship and establishing her as a rising talent within the firm. Yet for every success, obstacles materialized. Key emails arrived in her spam folder. Conference room reservations mysteriously disappeared. Crucial files were misplaced, then reappeared just past their deadlines. None of these incidents could be directly traced to Leora, yet Polly harbored little doubt about their source. I've noticed the difficulties you've been experiencing, Mr. Finch commented during their monthly review. Remarkably, your performance hasn't suffered despite these administrative challenges. I believe in focusing on factors within my control, Polly replied diplomatically. Finch nodded approvingly. A wise approach. I've mentioned these concerns to Mr. Summit. He suggested you join his task force on emerging markets, working directly with his office. Polly couldn't hide her surprise. That's typically a position for senior analysts. Typically, yes, but your work has caught his attention. This would mean coordinating directly with Mr. Summit, bypassing some of our standard protocols. Finch's meaningful glance told Polly he understood exactly what obstacles she'd been facing. When would this begin? She asked, already anticipating the implications. Immediately. You'll report to his office tomorrow morning. Finch smiled. Congratulations, Polly. You've earned this. That evening, as Polly prepared to leave, Leora appeared at her desk. Unlike their previous encounters, the secretary made no pretense of congeniality. Enjoy your temporary elevation, Ms. Daphne, she said quietly. Working closely with Mr. Summit comes with its own unique challenges. I welcome challenges, Polly replied evenly. They tend to reveal people's true capabilities and character. Something dangerous flickered in Leora's eyes. Indeed they do. I look forward to seeing what they reveal about you. As Leora walked away, Polly understood that their subtle power struggle had just escalated into open competition. Whatever game Leora was playing, the stakes had clearly risen, and Liam Summit appeared to be at its center. Chapter 3. Growing Attraction. Liam Summit's corner office offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Polly sat across from him, her portfolio open as they discussed the Emerging Markets Initiative. Your proposal for Southeast Asia identifies opportunities our senior analysts overlooked, Liam said, genuine admiration in his voice, particularly your assessment of infrastructure development in Vietnam. Thank you, sir, Polly replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the warmth his praise ignited. The region shows tremendous potential for sustainable investment if approached with cultural sensitivity. Precisely what separates exceptional analysts from merely competent ones. He leaned back in his chair. And please call me Liam when we're working together. Sir makes me feel like my father. Their meetings became a daily occurrence. What began as formal briefings evolved into collaborative strategy sessions, with Polly's innovative approaches complementing Liam's years of experience. They developed an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's thoughts and building on shared insights. You two have been sequestered for 3 hours, Leora remarked one afternoon, entering without knocking. The Tokyo investors are calling in 15 minutes. Thank you, Leora, Liam replied without looking up from Polly's projections. Please reschedule them for tomorrow. Ms. Daphne and I are finalizing the Singapore presentation. A flash of displeasure crossed Leora's features before her professional mask slipped back into place. Of course. Will you be requiring dinner sent up again? That would be appreciated, Liam answered, finally glancing up with a distracted smile. When the door closed behind Leora, Polly hesitated. Perhaps we should conclude for today. I wouldn't want to disrupt your schedule. My schedule exists to serve the company's priorities, not the other way around. Liam's expression softened. Besides, I find our discussions remarkably productive. As do I, Polly admitted, though I suspect not everyone shares that sentiment. Liam sat back, studying her. You've noticed Leora's territorial tendencies. It would be difficult not to, Polly said carefully. Leora has been with me since Summit Enterprises expanded internationally. She's invaluable, but perhaps overly protective of my time. He shrugged. She'll adjust to our working relationship. The Singapore presentation transformed Polly's standing within the company. When international investors approved her strategy unanimously, Liam insisted she lead the implementation team. Her colleagues now regarded her with respect bordering on awe. To the brilliant mind behind our Singapore success, Liam toasted during the celebration dinner with the executive team. Across the table, Leora's smile remained fixed as she sipped her champagne, her eyes never leaving Polly. Later that evening, Polly found herself alone in the elevator with Liam. The silence between them felt charged with unspoken awareness. Thank you for your confidence in my work, she said finally. I recognize talent when I see it, he replied, his voice softer than usual. But talent alone doesn't explain your success, Polly. You possess something rarer, integrity combined with vision. The use of her first name surprised her, creating an intimacy that both thrilled and alarmed her. I appreciate that, but it was a team effort. Humility, too, he smiled, his eyes lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. When the elevator reached the lobby, he hesitated. Would you allow me to drive you home? It's late, and cabs can be scarce at this hour. That's not necessary, she began, professional caution rising to the surface. Not necessary, perhaps, but I'd feel better knowing you arrived safely. His expression was earnest, free from the calculating charm she might have expected. Against her better judgment, she accepted. His car was luxurious, yet understated, much like the man himself. As they drove through the city streets, their conversation shifted from business to personal interests, art exhibitions they'd both attended, books that had shaped their thinking, travels that had broadened their perspectives. You're not what I expected, Liam confessed as they pulled up to her apartment building. What did you expect? Polly asked, curious despite herself. Someone ambitious, certainly. Intelligent, obviously. His hands remained on the steering wheel, his gaze forward. But not someone I'd enjoy talking with about everything from economic theory to obscure Italian cinema. Is that a bad thing? She asked quietly. He turned to her then, his expression serious. It's a complicated thing, Polly. The implications hung between them, their professional relationship, their positions within the company, the unspoken boundaries they were approaching. Good night, Liam, she said finally, opening the car door. Thank you for the ride. Good night, he replied, waiting until she entered her building before driving away. The following morning, Polly found Leora waiting at her desk, a manila folder in her manicured hands. Late night? The secretary's tone was conversational, but her eyes were sharp. The celebration was productive, Polly replied neutrally. Is there something you need, Leora? Just delivering the quarterly projections Mr. Summit requested you review. She placed the folder on the desk with deliberate precision. He seems quite taken with your professional insights. I'm simply doing my job. We all have jobs, Ms. Daphne. Some of us have been performing them faithfully for years. Leora leaned closer, her voice dropping. Mr. Summit appreciates loyalty above all else. Remember that before you allow yourself to become distracted. I'm very focused on my work, Polly replied evenly. But I appreciate your concern. As Leora walked away, Polly opened the folder to find not only the projections, but a handwritten note from Liam inviting her to lunch to discuss the next phase of their project. Despite her determination to maintain professional boundaries, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation the simple invitation provoked. Whatever was developing between them, friendship, respect, or something more complicated, had clearly not escaped Leora's notice, and Polly suspected the secretary's territorial behavior was just the beginning of what promised to be an increasingly complex situation. Chapter 4. Underhanded Tactics. Is it true you were hired because of diversity initiatives rather than merit? The question came from Daniel Pierce, a senior analyst who had previously been cordial to Polly. His expression suggested genuine curiosity rather than malice, which made the inquiry all the more disturbing. "Excuse me," Polly kept her voice level despite the sudden tension in her shoulders. "I heard Summit Enterprises had quotas to fill." Daniel shrugged apologetically. "Just office talk. No offense intended." "My credentials and performance records speak for themselves," Polly replied, maintaining her composure. "As does the Singapore success." "Of course," Daniel nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry I mentioned it." This wasn't the first troubling interaction Polly had experienced in recent weeks. Small comments, curious glances, and subtle shifts in colleagues' behavior suggested something was circulating through the office grapevine. What had begun as professional respect after the Singapore project now carried undercurrents of skepticism. During a departmental meeting, Polly noticed Marcus Davidson, the head of international finance, studying her with unusual intensity. When she presented her quarterly projections, he interrupted with unprecedented scrutiny. "These figures seem optimistic," he remarked, tapping his pen against the report. "Perhaps your personal relationship with Mr. Summit has colored your assessment." A hush fell over the conference room. Polly felt heat rising to her face, not from embarrassment, but from controlled anger. "My professional relationship with Mr. Summit is based on mutual respect for data-driven analysis," she responded, her voice steady. "These projections are supported by comprehensive market research, which you'll find in Appendix C." Davidson's eyes narrowed slightly before he nodded. "Very well. Continue." Later that afternoon, Mr. Finch approached her desk with a concerned expression. "Do you have a moment, Polly?" In the privacy of his office, he closed the door before speaking. "I've noticed some undercurrents regarding your position here, rumors about your qualifications and your working relationship with Mr. Summit." "I've noticed too," Polly acknowledged. "Any idea where they're originating?" Finch hesitated. "Nothing concrete, but I've observed Leora Lurie having rather intense conversations with several department heads recently. The timing seems coincidental." Polly nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. You've proven yourself a valuable asset to this company," Finch added. "Don't let office politics derail your focus." That evening, Polly worked late, analyzing discrepancies in quarterly reports. The office had emptied hours earlier, leaving behind the gentle hum of the ventilation system and the distant sounds of cleaning staff. As she gathered her belongings, she noticed light spilling from beneath Leora's office door. After a moment's hesitation, Polly approached and knocked firmly. "Enter," Leora's voice called. The secretary sat behind her immaculate desk, not a single document out of place. Her surprise at seeing Polly quickly transformed into a practiced smile. "Miss Daphne, working late again. Such dedication." "I've been hearing interesting things about myself lately," Polly said, closing the door behind her. "Curious theories about my qualifications and my professional relationships. Office gossip is an unfortunate reality in corporate environments," Leora replied smoothly. "I hope you're not letting it distract you." "What I find most interesting is the timing." Polly continued, maintaining steady eye contact. These rumors began circulating shortly after I joined the Emerging Markets Task Force. Coincidences do happen. Do they? Polly approached the desk. Or perhaps someone is deliberately attempting to undermine my professional reputation. Leora leaned back in her chair, dropping all pretense of cordiality. You're relatively new to corporate politics, Ms. Daphne. Let me offer some insight. Allegations require evidence. I'm not making allegations, Polly clarified. I'm asking a direct question. Are you spreading rumors about me? Would it matter if I were? Leora stood, her height advantage amplified by her stiletto heels. You've managed to accomplish in months what others work years to achieve. Did you really expect no resistance? I expected professional conduct, Polly replied. I expected competition based on merit rather than manipulation. Leora laughed, the sound sharp and without humor. How charmingly naive. This isn't academia with its lofty ideals and theoretical principles. This is business, where power and influence determine success. And where does Liam Summit fit into your business strategy? Polly asked quietly. Something dangerous flashed in Leora's eyes. Mr. Summit and I have a long-standing professional relationship built on mutual understanding and loyalty. Is that all it is? What else would it be? Leora's perfectly manicured nails drummed once against the polished surface of her desk. Though I suppose I could ask you the same question. My interest in Mr. Summit is purely professional, Polly stated firmly. How convenient for you to believe that? Leora's smile was cold. Men like Liam Summit aren't built for purely professional relationships with women like you. He appreciates beauty and intelligence, temporarily. Eventually, he'll recognize who truly belongs at his side. And that would be you? Polly couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. I've spent 5 years learning his preferences, anticipating his needs, and positioning myself as indispensable, Leora replied without hesitation. Liam Summit represents everything I've worked toward: wealth, power, social position. I won't allow a temporary distraction to derail my plans. The naked ambition in Leora's voice shocked Polly more than any rumor could have. Does he know you see him as a means to an end? Liam appreciates ambition, Leora countered. And unlike you, I'm not pretending my interest is purely professional. We both want something from him. I'm simply honest about my intentions. There's a difference between ambition and exploitation, Polly said quietly. How morally superior you sound, Leora scoffed. Shall we make a wager on how long your principles last when he offers you advancement in exchange for personal attention? Men like Liam Summit don't separate business from pleasure. You don't know me, Polly replied evenly. And based on this conversation, I don't think you know Liam either. I know enough, Leora stepped closer, her voice dropping. I know your background check revealed a scholarship student with no family connections or financial resources. I know your mother worked 3 jobs to put you through undergraduate studies before her illness. I know ambition born from necessity is the most dangerous kind. Polly stiffened. You investigated my personal history? Know your competition, Leora shrugged. Nothing I found was damaging, disappointingly ordinary, in fact. But everyone has vulnerabilities, Ms. Daphne, even you. Is that a threat? Consider it a word of caution, Leora replied. A warning that you're playing a game whose rules you don't yet understand. Polly maintained her composure as she turned to leave. At the door, she paused. You're wrong about one thing, Leora. This isn't a game to me. It's my career, built on genuine merit. Perhaps that's what truly threatens you. As she walked toward the elevator, Polly's mind raced. Leora's admission confirmed her suspicions but revealed something more troubling, a calculated determination that wouldn't be easily thwarted. The rumors were merely opening salvos in what promised to be an escalating conflict. What troubled her more was the realization that her growing feelings for Liam complicated the situation immeasurably. Professional ambition she could navigate, but personal attraction added layers of vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. The elevator doors closed, leaving her with the reflection of a woman at a crossroads, professionally and personally. Whatever came next would require all her resolve and intelligence. One thing was certain: underestimating Leora Lurie would be a dangerous mistake. Chapter 5: Truth and Confession. The Southeast Asian expansion has exceeded our quarterly projections by 17%, Polly concluded, displaying the final slide of her presentation. With the infrastructure initiatives in Malaysia coming online next month, we can anticipate further growth through the third quarter. The boardroom remained silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Liam Summit rose from his seat at the head of the table, his expression one of undisguised pride. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this conclusively demonstrates the wisdom of our strategic pivot," he announced. "Ms. Daphne's leadership on this project has been exemplary." As the executives filed out, offering congratulations as they passed, Polly gathered her materials with methodical precision. Despite the professional triumph, her confrontation with Leora lingered in her thoughts. The secretary had been conspicuously absent from today's presentation. "Dinner tonight," Liam said, approaching once the room had emptied. It wasn't a question. "We should celebrate properly." "I appreciate the offer, but perhaps something with the entire team would be more appropriate," Polly suggested carefully. "The team will have their celebration," he replied, his voice lowering. "But I'd like to discuss something with you privately, something beyond quarterly projections and market expansions." The intensity in his gaze made declining impossible. "7 o'clock? I'll send a car," he nodded, a smile warming his features. "Wear something that isn't corporate armor." Throughout the afternoon, Polly found herself distracted by anticipation and apprehension in equal measure. Her professional success provided undeniable satisfaction, yet the blurring boundaries with Liam created complications she hadn't planned for. Leora's warning echoed persistently. Men like Liam Summit don't separate business from pleasure. The sleek town car arrived exactly on time, delivering her to an unmarked door in the city's historic district. Inside, she discovered an intimate restaurant concealed from public view, with only a handful of tables spaced for privacy. Liam waited at a corner table, rising as she approached. His tailored suit had been replaced by dark slacks and a cashmere sweater that softened his commanding presence. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Without the office context, conversation flowed naturally from professional achievements to personal histories. Liam spoke of his early career struggles, the risks he'd taken when founding Summit Enterprises, and the personal cost of his professional success, a failed marriage and distant relationships with family. "Enough about my past," he said finally, refilling their wine glasses. "Tell me something about Polly Daphne that isn't in her impressive resume." She hesitated before sharing the story of her mother's illness during her university years, the nights spent studying beside a hospital bed, and the determination that had driven her since. "She didn't live to see me graduate," Polly admitted quietly, "but everything I've achieved has been built on her belief that education was the one thing no one could take from you." "She would be proud," Liam said, his hand covering hers briefly. "Not just of your professional success, but of the woman you've become." As dessert arrived, Liam's expression grew contemplative. "I didn't bring you here solely to celebrate your professional achievement, though it certainly deserves recognition." "I suspected as much," Polly replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I find myself thinking about you in ways that extend beyond professional admiration," he admitted, his voice carrying a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. Your intelligence, your integrity, your quiet strength, they've awakened something I thought I'd left behind in pursuit of corporate success. Polly felt her carefully constructed professional boundaries wavering. Liam, we work together. The complications. I'm well aware of the complexities, he interrupted gently. I've spent weeks analyzing them from every angle, as if this were merely another business proposition. But some things defy logical analysis. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box and opened it to reveal an elegant diamond ring. I love you, Polly Daphne. Will you marry me? The question hung between them, momentous, yet somehow inevitable. Their journey from professional colleagues to devoted partners had progressed with a natural certainty that made this culmination seem predestined. Yes, she answered simply, emotion thickening her voice. Yes, I will. His smile illuminated his features as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The weight of it felt both foreign and right, a tangible symbol of the transformation in their relationship. There's something you should know, she said after a moment, something that might affect our future together. She recounted her confrontation with Leora, carefully omitting the more inflammatory details, but conveying the essence. Leora harbored ambitions that included him, and she viewed Polly as an obstacle. Liam listened without interruption, his expression darkening. I suspected Leora's feelings extended beyond professional loyalty, but I didn't realize she'd taken such active measures against you. She's determined, Polly said simply. And while I can handle professional opposition, I'm concerned about how our relationship will escalate the situation. Leora's feelings, whatever they may be, are not reciprocated, Liam stated firmly. Her position at Summit Enterprises is secure based on her professional competence, but her personal aspirations regarding me are misplaced. She's convinced otherwise, Polly pointed out, and she's positioned herself as indispensable to you. No one is indispensable in business, he replied, though some are certainly more valuable than others. Polly considered her options carefully. Professional caution suggested maintaining distance. Personal inclination pulled her toward accepting the connection that had been building between them. Perhaps we could begin with honesty, she offered finally, acknowledging that there is something between us worth exploring while being mindful of the professional context. His smile held genuine warmth. Honesty is an excellent beginning. As he escorted her home later that evening, the usual professional distance between them had shifted into something more intimate, yet still respectful. At her door, he hesitated. May I see you this weekend? Away from work and all its complications? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. After a moment's consideration, Polly nodded. Yes, she replied simply. I'd like that. As she entered her apartment, Polly acknowledged that a threshold had been crossed. Whatever came next would irrevocably change both her professional and personal landscape. The question that remained was whether she was prepared for the storm that would inevitably follow. Chapter 6. Open warfare news traveled quickly through Summit Enterprises. By Monday morning, whispers followed Polly through the corridors, speculative glances and hushed conversations that ceased as she approached. Her weekend with Liam had been innocent enough, a gallery exhibition followed by dinner, but their appearance together outside the office context had ignited the corporate rumor mill. Ms. Daphne, a cool voice called as Polly passed the executive suite. Leora stood in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral, though her eyes held glacial fury. A moment of your time, please. Polly followed her into a small conference room, maintaining a composed demeanor despite the tension crackling between them. I understand congratulations are in order, Leora began once the door closed. Your personal relationship with Mr. Summit appears to be progressing nicely. My personal life isn't a topic for workplace discussion, Polly replied evenly. It becomes relevant when it affects company operations, Leora countered. particularly when it involves the CEO. She placed a file on the table. The board has expressed concerns about potential conflicts of interest. The board? Polly raised an eyebrow. Or you? Does the distinction matter? The appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as impropriety itself. Leora tapped a manicured nail against the folder. This contains a formal complaint regarding your rapid advancement under Mr. Summit's direct supervision, coinciding with your developing personal relationship. A complaint filed by whom? Anonymous concerns from several department heads, Leora replied smoothly. I'm merely the messenger. Polly opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing indignation. The document outlined a pattern of alleged preferential treatment, suggesting her professional accomplishments were the result of personal favor rather than merit. These allegations are baseless, Polly stated, closing the file. My work stands on its own. Perhaps, but perception matters in corporate environments. Leora's smile held no warmth. I'm offering you an opportunity to address this discreetly before it reaches the Ethics Committee. By doing what, exactly? Distance yourself from Mr. Summit professionally. Request a transfer to another department, perhaps international finance under Mr. Davidson. Leora's suggestion carried the unmistakable weight of an ultimatum. Demonstrate your commitment to avoiding conflicts of interest. And my personal relationship with Liam? That would naturally need to be reconsidered as well, Leora replied, for the good of the company. Polly studied the woman before her, poised, calculating, and utterly determined. This isn't about corporate ethics. It's about your own agenda. My only concern is Summit Enterprises' reputation and Mr. Summit's position, Leora insisted. Office romances rarely end well, particularly when significant power differentials exist. When the inevitable occurs, the professional fallout could damage both your career and his leadership. Your concern is noted, Polly said, rising. Is there anything else? Leora's expression hardened. Don't underestimate the damage this file could do to your carefully constructed career, Ms. Daphne. I'm offering you a professional courtesy, a chance to retreat gracefully. What you're offering is a thinly veiled threat based on manufactured concerns, Polly replied, her voice calm despite her rising anger. I won't be intimidated into abandoning either my position or my personal choices. Then you leave me no alternative but to proceed officially, Leora declared. The Ethics Committee meets on Thursday. I'd suggest preparing your defense. Polly departed without further comment, maintaining her composure until reaching the privacy of her office. The confrontation hadn't been unexpected, yet the calculated nature of Leora's attack, complete with manufactured documentation, revealed the depths of her determination. As she considered her options, a message appeared on her screen. My office? Now, LS. Liam's expression was thunderous when she entered. I've just received an interesting email from the Ethics Committee, he began without preamble. Apparently, I'm abusing my position to favor a subordinate with whom I'm romantically involved. Leora just informed me of the complaint, Polly confirmed. She suggested I transfer departments and reconsider our personal relationship to avoid an official investigation. Did she? His jaw tightened. How remarkably convenient for her agenda. The complaint appears to have statements from several department heads, Polly added. I've already spoken with Davidson and Reynolds. Neither submitted any such concerns, Liam replied. This entire file is fabricated, though cleverly done with just enough truth to seem plausible. How do you want to handle this? Directly, Liam stated, his expression resolute. I won't have your reputation or accomplishments undermined by baseless insinuations. He pressed the intercom. Margaret, please ask Ms. Lurie to join us immediately. The minutes that followed were tense with anticipation. When Leora entered, Her confident smile faltered slightly at seeing Polly already present. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Summit?" "Yes, Leora. Please explain why you fabricated an ethics complaint against Ms. Daphne." His tone was dangerously calm. "I haven't fabricated anything," Leora responded smoothly. "I'm merely processing concerns raised by various department heads regarding potential conflicts of interest." "Interesting," Liam replied, "because I've spoken directly with Davidson and Reynolds, who deny submitting any such concerns. In fact, they specifically praised Ms. Daphne's contributions and professionalism." Color drained from Leora's face, though her composure remained intact. "Perhaps there was a miscommunication. I received these statements through proper channels." "Stop," Liam's voice cut through her explanation. "We both know exactly what you're doing, and why. I've overlooked certain behaviors out of respect for your years of service, but this crosses a line I cannot ignore." Leora's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing naked desperation. "Liam, you can't possibly believe she's interested in you beyond what you can offer her professionally. She's using you to advance her career." "That's enough," he stated firmly. "Your accusations are not only false, but reveal more about your own motivations than Ms. Daphne's." "You've changed since she arrived," Leora persisted, abandoning pretense. "She's manipulating you, clouding your judgment." "My judgment is perfectly clear," Liam interrupted. "Ms. Daphne has demonstrated exceptional professional capabilities, which you're attempting to undermine through false accusations and manipulation." "I've devoted 5 years to you, to this company." Leora's voice trembled with suppressed emotion. "Everything I've done has been for your benefit, including fabricating ethics violations against a valued employee." Liam's question carried unmistakable disappointment. "That doesn't benefit me or Summit Enterprises." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he replied. "You've allowed personal feelings to compromise your professional judgment. Under normal circumstances, this would be grounds for immediate termination." Hope flickered briefly in Leora's eyes at the implied reprieve. "However," Liam continued, "in recognition of your past contributions, I'm issuing a formal warning instead. The ethics complaint will be withdrawn immediately, and you will issue a written apology to Ms. Daphne by end of day." "Liam, please." "Furthermore," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "any future attempts to undermine Ms. Daphne or any other employee will result in immediate dismissal. Is that understood?" Leora's expression hardened into cold fury. "Perfectly. You're dismissed." After she departed, a heavy silence filled the office. Polly finally spoke. "That won't be the end of it." "No," Liam agreed. "It won't. But it establishes clear boundaries and consequences." "She genuinely believes she belongs with you," Polly observed. "This warning won't change that conviction." "Perhaps not," Liam acknowledged, "but it limits her capacity to act on it within the company." "And us?" Polly asked quietly. "This situation complicates things considerably." Liam moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Only if we allow it to. I won't let Leora's actions dictate either my professional decisions or my personal choices." His confidence was reassuring, yet Polly couldn't shake the certainty that Leora's campaign had merely shifted tactics rather than ended. The secretary's parting expression had contained not resignation but calculation, the look of someone regrouping rather than retreating. "We should be prepared," she warned. "This was just her opening move." "Then we'll face whatever comes next together," Liam promised, his grip tightening on her hands. "Some things are worth fighting for." The sincerity in his voice dispelled her immediate concerns, though a lingering wariness remained. Leora Lurie had revealed herself as a determined adversary, one who wouldn't surrender easily what she considered rightfully hers. The battle lines had been drawn, and the corporate landscape had become a battlefield neither woman intended to abandon. Chapter 7. Proposal and Accusations. 6 months transformed Polly and Liam's tentative beginning into something neither had anticipated. Despite the initial tumult following Leora's formal warning, their relationship deepened beyond professional admiration into genuine partnership. Weekends were spent exploring art galleries, attending symphony performances, or simply enjoying quiet evenings discussing everything from economic theory to classic literature. Within the office, they maintained impeccable professional boundaries. Liam recused himself from direct oversight of Polly's projects, delegating supervision to the board while remaining informed of her contributions. This arrangement satisfied corporate governance requirements while allowing her accomplishments to stand on their own merit. Leora appeared to have accepted her defeat, retreating into rigid professionalism. Her formal apology had been minimal, yet sufficient, and subsequent interactions with Polly were coldly correct. If she harbored continued resentment, it remained carefully concealed behind efficient execution of her duties. The Tokyo expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule, Polly informed the executive committee, concluding her quarterly presentation. Initial investments should yield returns by third quarter, assuming currency stabilization continues. Excellent work as always, Ms. Daphne. Marcus Davidson nodded approvingly. The international finance director had become an unexpected ally following Leora's failed attempt to involve him in her fabricated complaints. Your projections for the Osaka market? Preliminary analysis suggests similar potential, though with higher initial capital requirements, she replied, displaying the relevant data. My team is developing a phased implementation strategy to mitigate risk. As the meeting adjourned, Liam approached with professional courtesy. Impressive work on the Asian markets, Ms. Daphne. Would you have time this evening to discuss the Osaka strategy further? Say, dinner at Meridian. Their practiced public interaction revealed nothing of their personal connection, though knowing glances passed between observing executives. The arrangement had become accepted, if occasionally remarked upon in private conversations. 7 o'clock would work with my schedule, Mr. Summit, Polly replied with equal formality. Unknown to both, Leora observed this exchange from the doorway, her eyes narrowing at the mention of Meridian, an intimate restaurant known for special occasions rather than business discussions. Making a discreet call to her contact at the establishment, she confirmed a private table had been reserved, with specific instructions regarding champagne service. The information confirmed her suspicions about Liam's intentions for the evening. Later that evening, as snow fell gently outside the restaurant's windows, Polly noticed Liam's unusual distraction. Typically focused and engaged during their discussions, he seemed preoccupied, his responses slightly delayed. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked. "You seem distant tonight." "Forgive me," he smiled, reaching for her hand across the table. "My thoughts are somewhat divided this evening." "Second thoughts about Osaka?" she suggested. "The capital requirements are substantial, but the potential return—" "This isn't about Tokyo or Osaka," he interrupted gently, "though your strategic thinking in both markets has been exemplary." "Then what's troubling you?" His expression softened as he studied her. "Nothing troubling. Quite the opposite." He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I've been contemplating our future, Polly. Not as colleagues or even as partners, but as something more permanent." Her breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a platinum ring with a solitaire diamond of elegant proportions. "I had intended an elaborate speech," he confessed with a self-deprecating smile, "something worthy of this moment. But finding myself here with you, I realize only simple truth matters." He took her hand. "I love you, Polly Daphne. Your intelligence, your integrity, your quiet strength. Will you marry me?" The question hung between them, momentous yet somehow inevitable. Their journey from professional colleagues to devoted partners had progressed with a natural certainty that made this culmination seem predestined. "Yes," she answered simply, emotion thickening her voice. "Yes, I will." The joy in his expression as he slipped the ring onto her finger dispelled any lingering doubts. Whatever complications their relationship might face, professionally or personally, they would navigate them together. Their celebration continued through dessert and champagne, discussing future possibilities with the same thoughtful analysis they applied to business ventures, though now infused with personal dreams. It was nearly 11 when they finally departed, Liam insisting on seeing her safely home despite the late hour. Outside the restaurant, a staff member discreetly informed the maitre d' of the couple's departure. Minutes later, Leora received a text confirmation that her surveillance had paid off. The proposal had occurred exactly as she'd anticipated. Rather than watching from within the restaurant as she'd initially planned, she had chosen a more dramatic approach. Quickly navigating to Polly's address, she positioned herself strategically near the entrance, timing her confrontation for maximum impact on their celebratory mood. As they approached her apartment building, Polly was surprised to see a familiar figure emerge from the shadows. Leora stood beside the entrance, her pale features stark against her dark coat, snowflakes gathering on her shoulders. "How touching," she remarked, her voice carrying in the quiet street. "A romantic evening culminating in a predictable proposal. Congratulations are in order, I suppose." "Leora, what are you doing here?" Liam demanded, stepping protectively closer to Polly. "Providing a courtesy," she replied coolly. "A final warning before irrevocable decisions are made." Her gaze shifted to Polly. "Has he told you about Catherine Winters?" Polly felt Liam tense beside her. "This isn't the time or place for whatever you're attempting, Leora." "On the contrary," Leora continued, undeterred, "before Ms. Daphne commits to a lifetime with you, she deserves to know about your previous entanglements, particularly those that ended, unfortunately." "Who is Catherine Winters?" Polly asked quietly, noting Liam's discomfort. "A former analyst at Summit Enterprises," Leora supplied before Liam could respond. "Remarkably similar to yourself, intelligent, ambitious, attractive." She too caught Liam's attention, though her subsequent departure was rather abrupt. Harassment allegations were mentioned, though nothing was ever formally filed. "That's a deliberate mischaracterization," Liam stated firmly. "Catherine resigned for personal reasons unrelated to our brief relationship." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Leora's smile held no warmth. "Just as Ms. Daphne's rapid advancement has nothing to do with your personal interest." "Enough," Liam stepped forward. "Your manipulations have failed before, Leora. They'll fail again." "Will they?" She turned her attention to Polly. "Ask yourself why a man of his position and wealth would choose someone with your background for anything beyond temporary diversion. Summit men marry connections, not scholarship cases with hospitalized mothers." The deliberate cruelty of the reference to Polly's mother revealed the depths of Leora's resentment. Before Liam could respond, Polly moved forward, her voice steady despite her anger. "My background is precisely what makes me valuable, Leora, both professionally and personally. I've earned everything through merit rather than manipulation. Can you say the same?" "Naive as ever," Leora scoffed. "You think this ring represents some grand romance? It's a calculated acquisition. Summit Enterprises needs fresh blood and public goodwill. You provide both. The brilliant minority woman who rose through determination. Excellent optics for the annual report." "You're projecting your own motivations onto others," Polly observed calmly. "Not everyone views relationships as strategic acquisitions." "This engagement changes nothing," Leora continued as if Polly hadn't spoken. "I've invested too many years in Liam Summit to abandon my plans now. Tonight I'm giving you fair warning. Walk away while you still can with your dignity intact." Your warning is noted and dismissed, Polly replied evenly. Now I suggest you leave before this becomes even more embarrassing for you. Something dangerous flashed in Leora's eyes. This isn't over, she stated, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Not by any measure. As she walked away into the falling snow, Liam turned to Polly with concern. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Leora has clearly crossed from professional resentment into something more disturbing. Was there any truth to her accusations about Catherine Winters? Polly asked directly. Some, he admitted. Catherine and I did have a brief relationship several years ago. When it ended, she chose to leave the company despite my assurances that her position was secure. There were no harassment allegations, formal or informal. Polly studied him carefully before nodding. Thank you for being honest. I should have told you earlier, he acknowledged. It didn't seem relevant, but Leora clearly intended to use it as a weapon. She's becoming increasingly desperate, Polly observed. That makes her dangerous. I'll speak with security tomorrow, Liam promised. Her behavior tonight crosses professional and personal boundaries. As they entered her apartment, Polly couldn't fully dispel the shadow Leora's appearance had cast over their evening. The engagement ring caught the light, its brilliance a counterpoint to the darkness of the confrontation. Second thoughts, Liam asked softly, noting her pensive expression. Not about us, she assured him. But Leora's determination concerns me. She clearly believes she has legitimate claim to you, to the future she's planned. Her beliefs don't change reality, he replied, drawing her close. And the reality is that I've chosen you, Polly Daphne, not for corporate optics or temporary diversion, but for the remarkable woman you are. His certainty was reassuring, yet as Polly settled into his embrace, she couldn't shake the conviction that Leora's warning wasn't empty threat, but genuine promise. The secretary had invested years in her pursuit of Liam Summit. Such calculated determination wouldn't dissolve in the face of an engagement ring, no matter how symbolic. Whatever came next would require vigilance and strength, qualities Polly possessed in abundance. If Leora sought battle, she would find Polly Daphne a more formidable opponent than anticipated. Chapter 8. A Bittersweet Wedding. The anonymous letters began arriving 3 weeks after the engagement announcement. The first appeared on Eleanor Summit's breakfast table, an elegant cream envelope containing carefully composed insinuations about Polly's background and motivations. Gold digger is such a harsh term, Liam's mother remarked during their Sunday dinner, sliding the letter across the table. Though this writer certainly implies as much. Polly accepted the letter with calm dignity, scanning its contents while Liam read over her shoulder, his expression darkening with each line. This is Leora's work, he stated flatly. The phrasing, the specific references to Polly's scholarship background, it's consistent with her previous accusations. Possibly, Eleanor replied, studying Polly's reaction carefully. Though proving it would be difficult, anonymous letters are notoriously untraceable. Have you received others? Polly asked, noting the casual way Eleanor had introduced the subject. 2, she admitted. The first merely suggested your relationship was advancing with unusual speed. The second questioned whether Liam's judgment had been compromised by physical attraction. Mother, I apologize for this nonsense, Liam began, but Eleanor waved away his concern. I raised a son capable of making his own decisions, she stated firmly. More importantly, I've spent enough time with Polly to form my own assessment. These letters reveal more about their author than their subject. Her acceptance warmed Polly, though the targeted campaign troubled her. We should expect more, she warned. Leora is methodical and patient. Let her waste her energy, Eleanor shrugged. The wedding proceeds as planned. Similar letters reached Liam's sister in Boston, his uncle in Chicago, and several board members at Summit Enterprises. Each contained carefully crafted doubts about Polly's character, suggesting opportunism rather than genuine affection, motivated her acceptance of Liam's proposal. "She's attempting to isolate you from family support," Mr. Finch observed when Polly confided in him. The older man had become something of a mentor and ally. Classic manipulation tactic. "The strategy seems futile," Polly replied. "Liam's family has been remarkably supportive despite the letters." "Perhaps isolation isn't the primary goal," Finch suggested thoughtfully. "Consider the timing. Each letter arrives at moments of significant wedding preparations, venue selection, guest list finalization, your dress fitting." Understanding dawned. She's attempting to taint every milestone with controversy. "Precisely," Finch nodded. "The joy of planning your wedding becomes overshadowed by damage control." Despite these attempts, preparations advanced. Polly and Liam chose a small ceremony in the botanical garden, where they had spent their third date discussing economic theory beneath flowering magnolias. The guest list remained intimate: family, close friends, and select colleagues who had supported their relationship. Leora's behavior at the office maintained professional correctness, though her interactions with Polly carried unmistakable cold hostility. If others noticed, they refrained from commenting. The secretary's 5-year tenure had established her as a permanent fixture at Summit Enterprises, her efficiency undeniable despite her personal agenda. 2 days before the wedding, a final anonymous package arrived at Polly's apartment. Unlike the previous letters, this contained photographs, surveillance images of Liam entering various restaurants with different women over the past several years. "Business meetings," Liam explained when she showed him, his exasperation evident. "Clients, colleagues, potential investors. She's deliberately removed all context." "The timing is strategic," Polly observed. "Maximum emotional impact before the ceremony." "Does it create doubt?" he asked, searching her expression. "No," she replied honestly, "but it reveals Leora's escalating desperation, which concerns me." Security was discreetly enhanced for the ceremony, though Polly insisted they wouldn't allow fear to overshadow their celebration. The morning dawned clear and bright, the botanical garden verdant with early summer blooms. As she prepared in the small bridal suite, surrounded by Eleanor and Liam's sister Caroline, Polly experienced moments of perfect happiness, untainted by recent tensions. "You look radiant," Eleanor declared, adjusting Polly's simple veil. The wedding dress was elegant rather than extravagant, ivory silk that complemented her complexion and emphasized her natural grace. "Is everything secure?" Caroline asked quietly, her protective instincts heightened by the anonymous campaign. "Security has confirmed all guests against the approved list," Eleanor assured her. "No unexpected visitors will disrupt today's celebration." The ceremony proceeded with intimate perfection. Standing before their gathered loved ones, Polly and Liam exchanged vows that acknowledged both their professional beginnings and personal journey. Mr. Finch beamed from the front row, while Eleanor dabbed discreetly at her eyes. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Summit," the officiant announced to applause and cheers. The reception took place in the garden's glass pavilion, sunlight streaming through the transparent ceiling onto tables adorned with simple arrangements of seasonal flowers. As congratulations flowed and champagne circulated, Polly allowed herself to relax into the celebration. "Mrs. Summit," a familiar voice interrupted, as Polly accepted good wishes from Davidson and his wife. "How perfectly traditional of you to take his name." Leora stood before her in an ice-blue dress that emphasized her pale beauty, her professional mask replaced by brittle civility. "Leora," Polly acknowledged, maintaining composure despite her surprise. "I wasn't aware you were on the guest list." "A last-minute addition," Leora smiled thinly. "Liam has relied on me for 5 years. How could I miss his special day?" Before Polly could respond, Liam appeared at her side, his expression guarded. "Leora, this is unexpected." "I waited for my formal invitation," she replied, her voice carrying subtle accusation. "When it evidently became lost, I realized it must have been an oversight. After all, your trusted assistant would naturally be included in such an important occasion." The calculated manipulation was obvious, crashing the wedding while maintaining plausible deniability. Security had likely admitted her given her known association with Liam. "How thoughtful of you to join us," Polly replied smoothly, refusing to allow tension to infiltrate her day. "Please enjoy the celebration." Leora's smile remained fixed as she leaned closer to Polly, whispering, "Such a lovely ceremony. Almost enough to make one believe in lasting love. Enjoy this moment. It's the pinnacle of what you'll have together." Without waiting for response, she moved into the gathering, accepting champagne from a circulating waiter. "I should have her removed," Liam muttered, watching Leora navigate through their guests with practiced charm. "Let her stay," Polly decided. Ejecting her would create precisely the scene she wants. This way, she remains just another guest, while we celebrate with those who genuinely support us. The remainder of the reception proceeded without incident. If guests wondered at Leora's presence, given the known tensions, they maintained polite silence. She remained on the periphery, observing with calculating attention but refraining from further direct confrontation. As the celebration drew to a close, Polly and Liam prepared to depart for their honeymoon in the Greek islands, a 2-week respite from corporate responsibilities and lingering tensions. "Mrs. Summit," Leora approached as they said their final goodbyes, her voice pitched for privacy. "Congratulations on your triumph today. You've achieved what many women desire: security, status, wealth by proxy. What I've found with Liam goes far beyond material considerations," Polly replied evenly. "Something you might understand if you valued people above position." "How charmingly romantic." Leora's smile never reached her eyes. "Enjoy your honeymoon. I'll ensure Summit Enterprises runs smoothly in your husband's absence." "I have complete confidence in the executive team," Liam interjected pointedly. "The company will manage perfectly well without either of us for 2 weeks." Irritation flashed briefly across Leora's features before her mask of civility returned. "Of course. Safe travels." As their car pulled away amid shower of rose petals, Polly released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "She's not finished," she observed quietly. "No," Liam agreed, taking her hand, "but neither are we." The Aegean sunset welcomed them hours later, painting their private villa in hues of amber and gold. Standing on the terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, Polly felt the tension of recent months begin to dissolve. No anonymous letters, no corporate politics, no Leora Luri, Liam murmured, drawing her into his embrace. "Just us, beginning our life together." Polly leaned into his strength, allowing herself this perfect moment while acknowledging the challenges that awaited their return. Leora had invested too much in her pursuit of Liam Summit to surrender gracefully to marriage vows and legal documents. The battlefield had merely shifted, not disappeared. But for these 2 weeks they would celebrate their victory and strengthen their bond against whatever awaited them in the corporate arena they both navigated so skillfully. Chapter 9. Seeds of Doubt. The Greek islands provided a perfect sanctuary. For 2 weeks, Polly and Liam existed in a world defined by crystalline waters, ancient ruins, and uninterrupted togetherness. They explored whitewashed villages, dined in family tavernas where no one recognized the CEO of Summit Enterprises, and spent long evenings discussing future plans. "We could build a summer home here," Liam suggested as they watched sunset paint the Santorini cliffs in gold. "Somewhere to escape when corporate life becomes overwhelming." "I'd like that," Polly agreed, "though I suspect you'd still check market reports before breakfast." "Only briefly," he promised with a smile. Some habits are difficult to break. While they savored their seclusion back in the city, Leora Lurie remained busy. Their absence provided her valuable time to implement the next phase of her strategy. With careful precision, she collected and doctored evidence, establishing surveillance protocols, and laying groundwork for the campaign she would launch upon their return. Each evening, she meticulously transformed innocent business photographs into suggestive evidence of infidelity. Her connections with certain photographers provided raw material that, with strategic editing, would serve her purpose perfectly. The newlyweds' return to reality began with the transatlantic flight. Liam's attention gradually shifted toward his tablet, reviewing developments during their absence. By the time they landed, his mind had clearly re-engaged with corporate matters. Davidson's recommendations for the Milan acquisition need adjustment, he muttered as they collected their luggage. The valuation metrics seem optimistic given current market conditions. The analysis team tends toward conservatism, Paulie reminded him. If they're supporting his assessment, the fundamentals must be sound. The observation earned a distracted nod as he scrolled through additional reports. Reality had reclaimed him even before they reached home. Their new penthouse apartment welcomed them with elegant comfort, though the stack of mail provided immediate reconnection to responsibilities. Separate the urgent from the merely important, Polly suggested, eyeing the impressive accumulation. You take corporate, I'll handle personal, Liam proposed, already reaching for correspondence bearing the Summit Enterprises letterhead. There's a message from Leora, Liam remarked, his tone deliberately casual. Requesting a breakfast meeting tomorrow to review priority matters before you return to the office. At least she's maintaining professional protocols, Polly observed, though I imagine she's disappointed you're not rushing in this evening. Years ago, I might have, he admitted. Tonight belongs to us. The following morning, Liam departed early for his breakfast meeting, leaving Polly to prepare for her own return to corporate life. Mrs. Summit, Leora appeared in Polly's doorway, emphasizing the new surname with subtle inflection. Welcome back. I trust your honeymoon was rejuvenating. Thank you, Leora. Greece was lovely. Polly maintained professional courtesy despite the undercurrent of hostility. Liam, Mr. Summit, depends on consistent support, Leora replied, particularly during transitional periods. The implication hung in the air. Her marriage represented merely another phase in Liam's life, one Leora had weathered before and would endure again. Just delivering your updated security credentials. Leora placed a small envelope on the desk. Your access has been adjusted to reflect your new status. The phrasing was precise, not elevated or expanded, merely altered. Another subtle reminder that marriage to the CEO didn't automatically confer professional advancement. 2 weeks after their return, Polly discovered an envelope on her desk containing photographs of Liam dining with an attractive woman at an upscale restaurant. The timestamp indicated the previous evening, when he'd mentioned a late meeting with European investors. The images were deliberately ambiguous, showing moments of apparent intimacy, Liam leaning close to speak, the woman's hand briefly touching his, shared laughter that could be interpreted as flirtation. That evening, she placed the photographs on their dining table as Liam loosened his tie. Productive meeting with the European contingent. He glanced at the images, frowning slightly. Where did these come from? They appeared on my desk today, Polly replied. No note, though the message seems clear enough. This was strictly business, he stated firmly. Marguerite Leclerc represents French investors considering participation in our Asian expansion. Davidson and Reynolds were present, though conveniently omitted from these images. I assumed as much, Polly nodded, though someone clearly hopes I'll reach different conclusions. Leora, Liam muttered, his expression darkening. This surveillance crosses professional and legal boundaries. Yet proving her involvement would be nearly impossible, Polly observed. The photographs themselves aren't damaging with proper context. It's the deliberate implication that matters. The incident marked the beginning of a subtle campaign. Every few weeks, similar evidence appeared, Liam's late meetings documented with selective framing, business interactions presented without context, moments that could be interpreted as inappropriate if one were inclined toward suspicion. Polly maintained rational perspective, discussing each incident openly with Liam. The transparency between them disarmed the intended effect, though the persistent drip of insinuation created a low-grade tension that subtly affected their otherwise harmonious relationship. 3 months into their marriage, the strategy escalated. Rather than photographic evidence, Polly began receiving text messages from unknown numbers. Ask your husband about his dinner at Luciano's last night. The private dining room provides excellent discretion. Does he always work late on Thursdays or only since the blonde from legal joined the regulatory committee? Each message contained just enough accurate information to seem credible. Liam had indeed attended meetings at the mentioned locations or with the referenced individuals. The manipulative framing transformed innocent business interactions into implied indiscretions. This is becoming ridiculous, Liam declared when Polly showed him the latest message. I've had Davidson investigating the source, but the numbers change constantly. It's wearing, Polly admitted. Not because I believe the implications, but because it forces constant vigilance and explanation. Every business meeting becomes a potential source of manufactured suspicion. Despite their unity against these tactics, the campaign gradually achieved subtle effects. Liam began providing preemptive explanations for meetings and late work sessions, sometimes mentioning witnesses who could verify his activities. I'll be meeting with the Tokyo team tomorrow evening, he mentioned one night over dinner. Davidson and Chen will attend the entire session, which should conclude by 9. You don't need to provide a detailed itinerary, Polly replied gently. I trust you, Liam. I know, he acknowledged, but these constant insinuations make me increasingly conscious of how situations might appear without context. The observation revealed Leora's strategic success, not in creating genuine distrust, but in forcing hyper-awareness that subtly altered their natural dynamic. 6 months into their marriage, Polly received the most potentially damaging message yet. A forwarded email thread appearing to show Liam arranging a weekend getaway with someone identified only as C. The messages discussed discretion, private accommodations, and ensuring no professional connections. Unlike previous manipulations, this evidence wasn't easily dismissed. The email appeared genuine, including Liam's actual address and characteristic communication style. When confronted, his expression reflected genuine confusion. This is fabricated, he stated after examining the exchange. I never wrote these messages. They certainly appear authentic, Polly observed, studying his reaction carefully. Someone with access to my email patterns could potentially construct something like this, he reasoned. The phrasing mimics my style, but I never sent these messages. There is no weekend getaway, no mysterious C. Polly believed him, yet the seed of doubt had been skillfully planted. This fabrication showed greater sophistication and greater determination to undermine their relationship. That night, as Liam slept beside her, Polly considered their situation with strategic clarity. Leora's campaign had evolved from nuisance to genuine threat, not because Polly doubted Liam's fidelity, but because the cumulative effect created unnecessary strain. Something needed to change. Passive endurance had proven ineffective against Leora's determination. The time had come for more decisive action, a response that would finally neutralize the threat Leora Lurie posed to their marriage and happiness. Chapter 10. Fracturing Trust. The fabricated email proved a turning point. Though Polly initially accepted Liam's denial, the seed of doubt took root in subtle ways. She found herself observing his behaviors with newfound awareness, noting late nights, unexpected schedule changes, and moments of distraction that previously would have passed without comment. Liam sensed the shift in her demeanor. "You're watching me," he remarked one evening as she studied him across the dinner table, "as if you're cataloging inconsistencies." "I'm not," she replied automatically, though the observation carried uncomfortable truth. "You are," he countered gently, "and I understand why. These constant insinuations would affect anyone, even someone with your remarkable composure." His understanding only heightened her discomfort. "I hate that she's achieving her goal," Polly admitted, "creating distance between us through manufactured suspicion." "Then we can't allow it," Liam stated firmly. "Perhaps it's time we considered more decisive measures regarding Leora's position at Summit Enterprises." "Terminating her would appear as vindictive retaliation," Polly cautioned. "It might generate sympathy for her while reflecting poorly on your leadership." "Then what's your solution?" A note of frustration entered his voice. "We've tried ignoring her manipulations, maintaining transparency between us, investigating message sources. Nothing has stopped her campaign." The tension lingered between them, creating the first genuine rift in their relationship. Not distrust exactly, but a weariness that eroded their natural harmony. Their first serious argument erupted a week later when Liam canceled their anniversary dinner, celebrating 6 months of marriage, due to an emergency meeting with investors from Dubai. "The timing is remarkably convenient," Polly observed, her tone sharper than intended. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Liam's expression hardened. "Nothing," she backtracked. "It's just frustrating." "It's more than frustration I'm hearing," he challenged. "After everything we've faced together, do you actually believe I'd manufacture a business emergency to avoid an anniversary dinner?" "Of course not," Polly insisted, though her hesitation before responding was noticeable. "That pause speaks volumes," Liam remarked coldly. "Apparently, Leora's tactics have proven more effective than either of us recognized." The argument escalated, months of accumulated tension finding release in bitter accusations and defensive responses. When Liam's phone chimed with a message, Polly's instinctive glance toward the screen ignited genuine anger. "Check it if you don't trust me," he snapped, tossing the phone toward her. This is exactly what she wants, turning ordinary moments into evidence of supposed deception. "I don't want to check your phone," Polly retorted. "I want our relationship back, before constant vigilance and explanation became our normal." "That requires trust," Liam responded. "Something currently in short supply, it seems." Their reconciliation was perfunctory rather than genuine, professional courtesy masking lingering resentment. In the days that followed, their interactions carried an undercurrent of caution previously absent from their relationship. 2 weeks later, a memo circulated through senior management about expanding Summit's presence in the Singapore market. What caught Polly's attention wasn't the expansion itself, which aligned with her previous recommendations, but a name mentioned as strategic consultant, Catherine Winters. "Catherine Winters is rejoining us?" Polly asked Davidson casually after the briefing. "Temporarily," he confirmed. "She's established herself as a regional expert since leaving Summit. Her insights on the cultural nuances of the Singapore banking sector are particularly valuable." "I wasn't aware she'd specialized in that region," Polly remarked, recalling Leora's warnings about Liam's previous relationship with the woman. "Oh yes, quite successfully," Davidson nodded. "Liam specifically requested her involvement given her track record. I believe they worked together years ago on our initial Asian ventures." Later that evening, Polly raised the subject with deliberate neutrality. "I saw Catherine Winters is consulting on the Singapore expansion." Liam's momentary hesitation was barely perceptible. "Yes, her expertise is valuable for the regulatory framework we're navigating." Interesting that her name hasn't come up in our discussions of the project, Polly observed. It's a recent development, Liam replied, attention focused on his tablet. Davidson suggested her involvement last week. The explanation seemed plausible, yet Polly couldn't dismiss the uncomfortable awareness that this represented the first significant omission in their professional discussions. Whether intentional or oversight, it carried troubling implications. The next conflict centered around a business trip to Chicago, a standard quarterly review suddenly extended by 3 days without detailed explanation. When Liam returned, Polly noticed his distraction during dinner, his attention repeatedly drawn to his phone. "Important messages?" she inquired, striving for casual interest rather than interrogation. "Davidson needs clarification on the Westridge proposal," he replied without elaborating. "At 9 in the evening. International markets operate across time zones," he reminded her, irritation edging his voice. "This is hardly unusual." "Of course," she conceded, "though your attention to Davidson's concerns seems particularly focused tonight." Liam set down his fork with deliberate control. "Are we really doing this again? Transforming normal business communications into evidence of imagined indiscretions?" "I'm merely observing that you've been unusually absorbed in your phone since returning from Chicago," Polly stated. "A trip that mysteriously extended without explanation." "I don't require your approval for standard business operations," he retorted. "Nor do I owe detailed itineraries for every meeting that arises." "Transparency was your suggestion," she reminded him, "to counter Leora's manipulations." "Transparency, yes. Constant justification, no." His voice hardened. "I'm beginning to understand why my first marriage failed if this is what domestic life entails." The comparison stung more than any previous argument. "I'm not your ex-wife," Polly replied coldly, "nor am I making unreasonable demands. I'm responding to an orchestrated campaign designed to create exactly this tension between us." "Yet knowing its orchestrated nature hasn't prevented you from succumbing to its intended effect," Liam observed. The evening ended in strained silence, neither willing to bridge the widening gap between them. Over the following weeks, their once easy companionship deteriorated into careful civility, punctuated by increasingly frequent conflicts. The breaking point arrived at a charity gala where Summit Enterprises featured prominently among donors. Polly spotted Liam in extended conversation with a woman she instantly recognized as Catherine Winters, the former analyst whose involvement in their Singapore project had been so casually mentioned. In person, she matched Leora's description perfectly. Intelligent, attractive, with an easy familiarity toward Liam that suggested their previous connection ran deeper than a mere professional association. When Polly approached, Liam's introduction was cordial but brief. "Catherine, this is my wife, Polly. Catherine recently returned from our Singapore office to consult on the expansion." "Lovely to meet you," Catherine smiled. "Liam was just updating me on changes since my departure. Summit Enterprises has flourished under his continued leadership." The conversation shifted to professional matters, though Polly noted subtle undercurrents in their interaction, shared references to previous projects, inside jokes that excluded her, a casual comfort reflecting established history. Most telling was the way Catherine's hand occasionally touched Liam's arm for emphasis, a gesture he neither encouraged nor discouraged. Later that evening, as they returned home in chilled silence, Polly finally voiced her observations. "You never mentioned Catherine had returned from Singapore." "I told you she was consulting on the expansion," Liam replied dismissively. "We discussed this weeks ago." "You mentioned her involvement when I brought it up after seeing her name on Davidson's memo," Polly corrected. "Not the same as informing me a woman you previously dated was rejoining the company." "Her role is strictly professional," Liam's voice carried defensive irritation. "Her expertise in the region is valuable." "And your history with her? Is that valuable too?" Liam's expression hardened. We had this discussion months ago. Catherine and I had a brief relationship years before I met you. It's ancient history with no bearing on present circumstances. Yet you failed to mention her return until I discovered it independently, Polly persisted. An oversight or deliberate omission? This is exactly why I didn't volunteer the information, he snapped, to avoid precisely this type of baseless accusation. Is it baseless? She challenged. Your body language tonight suggested considerable comfort with someone you described as a brief relationship from the past. The shared jokes, her casual touches, your obvious history, it all indicates something more substantial than you've acknowledged. The argument escalated beyond previous conflicts, each accusation scratching deeper at the foundation of trust between them. When Liam finally demanded, "What would convince you of my fidelity? GPS tracking? Surveillance cameras? Or perhaps a signed affidavit from everyone I meet?" Polly reached her breaking point. "I need space," she declared, voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "This isn't working." That night, she packed essentials and relocated to her former apartment, which they had fortunately not yet sold. As the door closed behind her, Polly finally acknowledged Leora's victory. The secretary had achieved precisely what months of manipulations had intended: separation based not on actual infidelity, but manufactured doubt, strategically amplified by introducing a real person from Liam's past at the perfect moment. The realization crystallized Polly's resolve. Emotional reaction had played directly into Leora's strategy. The time for passive response had ended. Whatever came next would require calculated precision rather than wounded pride, a strategic offensive against an adversary who had proven far more determined than either of them had anticipated. Chapter 11. The Confrontation. 3 days of separation brought painful clarity. Alone in her former apartment, Polly analyzed the systematic dismantling of her marriage with the same analytical precision she applied to financial markets. Each manipulation, each insinuation, each manufactured piece of evidence formed a pattern too deliberate to be coincidental. Leora had orchestrated a masterful campaign, exploiting natural insecurities while maintaining plausible deniability. The strategy had succeeded precisely because Polly and Liam had reacted emotionally rather than strategically, playing defense when offense was required. Polly glanced at her laptop screen, where a folder labeled Lure. She'd also received a supportive call from Eleanor Summit that morning. "Marriage requires resilience, dear," Liam's mother had counseled. "Don't let manufactured drama separate two people clearly meant for each other." Eleanor's perspective provided welcome reinforcement of Polly's growing conviction. On the fourth evening, as rain lashed against the windows, a sharp knock interrupted Polly's contemplation. Opening the door revealed Leora Lurie, rainwater glistening on her black trench coat, her expression one of practiced concern. "May I come in?" she asked without waiting for invitation, stepping into the apartment with assured familiarity. "I heard about your separation. Office gossip travels quickly." "I imagine it does when carefully cultivated," Polly replied, closing the door. "What brings you here, Leora?" A gesture of empathy, Leora removed her coat, revealing an elegant dress beneath. "And perhaps a degree of sympathy. The dissolution of a marriage is never pleasant, even one with such obvious incompatibilities." "Is that your professional assessment?" Polly asked, maintaining composed neutrality despite her inner tension. "It's hardly surprising," Leora continued, surveying the apartment with casual interest. "Men like Liam require particular handling, attention to specific needs, tolerance for certain behaviors. Not everyone is equipped for such complexity. While you, of course, understand him perfectly." 5 years provides considerable insight, Leora acknowledged. "I've witnessed his patterns, anticipated his requirements, managed his indiscretions with appropriate discretion." "How considerate," Polly remarked. though your concern seems oddly timed given your orchestrated campaign to create exactly this outcome. Leora's smile remained undisturbed. Accusations require evidence, Ms. Daphne, or should I still say Mrs. Summit? The title seems increasingly temporary. My marriage is hardly your concern, Polly stated. On the contrary, Leora countered, her composure slipping slightly to reveal underlying intensity. Liam's Summit has been my primary concern for 5 years. I've invested too much to watch him bound to someone incapable of managing his complexities. Is that why you're here? To claim your prize now that you believe we've separated? I'm here to offer clarity, Leora replied. Tonight I'm taking your husband. If you're brave enough, try and stop me. Her tone carried absolute conviction. He's meeting me for dinner in an hour to discuss the reorganization of certain executive functions. Given your absence, decisions regarding your former projects require immediate attention. Professional responsibilities only, I'm sure, Polly observed. Initially, Leora admitted with surprising candor, but comfort during emotional upheaval often evolves into more meaningful connection. Liam requires stability, something I've provided consistently while you've offered only complications and accusations. You've engineered those complications deliberately, Polly challenged. The anonymous letters, the manipulated photographs, the fabricated emails, a comprehensive campaign to undermine our relationship. Prove it, Leora shrugged elegantly. Even if you could, it hardly matters now. The damage is done. You've demonstrated your fundamental incompatibility by succumbing to exactly the doubts a suitable partner would have dismissed. The calm certainty in her voice revealed complete confidence in her strategy's success. In that moment, Polly recognized that Leora genuinely believed victory was already secured, that her campaign had irreparably damaged a relationship she had never considered legitimate. Why are you really here, Leora? Polly asked quietly. To gloat? To ensure I understand my defeat. Seems unnecessarily vindictive even for you. Something flickered across Leora's perfect features, perhaps surprise at the question's directness. Perhaps I wanted to see for myself, she admitted, the woman who temporarily captured what I've worked years to secure, to understand what Liam saw in you before reality inevitably reasserted itself. And your conclusion? Exactly as expected, Leora replied dismissively. Intelligence without instinct for self-preservation. Principles without pragmatism. You never stood a chance against someone who understands how this world actually operates. The world of manipulation and strategic deception, Polly nodded. You're quite accomplished in that arena. I prefer strategic influence, Leora corrected with a thin smile, though the results speak for themselves. They certainly do, Polly agreed, moving toward her laptop. Which brings me to why I've been expecting you, though perhaps not quite so soon. Confusion briefly crossed Leora's expression. Expecting me? Your pattern has been remarkably consistent, Polly explained, opening a document. Each escalation followed by direct observation of its effects. The photographs appeared, then you monitored our interactions at the office. The fabricated emails were sent, then you arranged meetings requiring my response. You needed to witness the damage personally, confirmation of your strategy's success. An interesting theory, Leora replied, though her confident posture had subtly tensed. More than theory, Polly continued. While you were cultivating doubts between Liam and me, I've been building something else entirely. Evidence. She turned the laptop screen toward Leora, displaying a document labeled Lurie Investigation Comprehensive Findings. The first anonymous letter to Eleanor Summit was mailed from the post office 3 blocks from your apartment, Polly began. Coincidental, perhaps, but the security footage showing you entering that post office 10 minutes before the postmark timestamp seems rather definitive. Color drained from Leora's face. You've been investigating me. You devoted months to destroying my marriage, Polly replied calmly. Did you expect no response? The burner phones used for text messages were purchased with a credit card belonging to your cousin in Philadelphia, the same cousin who visits you quarterly, and who, interestingly, bears a remarkable resemblance to you in convenience store surveillance footage. This is absurd, Leora protested. Manufactured evidence. Like the emails supposedly from Liam arranging a weekend getaway, Polly interrupted. IT security traced its origin to a proxy server regularly accessed from your home network, not conclusive alone, but combined with the other evidence. What do you want? Leora demanded, her composed facade crumbling. That depends entirely on your next actions, Polly replied. Your announcement that you're taking my husband suggests you've planned some final maneuver tonight. I'm curious what it entails. Professional dinner, Leora insisted. Nothing more. Then you won't mind if I attend, Polly suggested, since it's merely professional business regarding projects I've directly managed. Genuine panic flashed across Leora's features. That wouldn't be appropriate given your separation. So there is more to tonight's agenda, Polly nodded. Let me guess, consoling the abandoned husband, offering comfort that evolves into reconnection, perhaps even presenting evidence of my supposed infidelity to ensure complete emotional severance. Leora's silence confirmed the assessment. What you've never understood about Liam, Polly continued quietly, is that manipulation doesn't engage him. Integrity does. You've spent years calculating how to position yourself as indispensable without recognizing that genuine connection requires vulnerability, not strategy. Sentimental illusions, Leora scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. Men like Liam Summit require careful management. Men like Liam require honesty, Polly corrected, something you've never offered him. Rain continued beating against the windows as the two women regarded each other across the increasingly charged space. Leora's carefully constructed confidence had visibly fractured, while Polly's calm certainty remained unshaken. Tonight I'm taking your husband. If you're brave enough, try and stop me, Leora had declared upon arrival. Now, facing evidence of her systematic campaign, her challenge had transformed from victory declaration to desperate final gambit. You have a choice, Polly stated finally. Leave now and abandon whatever you've planned for tonight, or proceed knowing I'll be presenting this evidence to both Liam and the Summit Enterprises Board tomorrow morning. For a moment, Leora seemed genuinely uncertain, her calculated existence confronting unexpected variables. Then her expression hardened into resolute determination. You're bluffing, she decided, retrieving her coat. And even if you're not, it's too late. The damage to your marriage is already done. As the door closed behind her, Polly released a measured breath. Leora's departure wasn't surrender, but defiance, a commitment to whatever endgame she had planned for that evening. The secretary's confidence suggested one final card remained to be played, one devastating revelation she believed would permanently sever Polly's connection to Liam Summit. The confrontation had confirmed what Polly had suspected. Leora would proceed regardless of warning or evidence, which meant the time for defensive measures had passed. Whatever happened next would require the offensive strategy Polly had been quietly developing since their separation began, a comprehensive response to end Leora's manipulation permanently. Reaching for her phone, Polly made 2 calls in quick succession, first to Mr. Finch, whose integrity and influence on the board would prove invaluable, and then to Eleanor Summit, whose insight into her son's history with Catherine Winters might provide the final piece of context needed before confronting Leora's endgame. Chapter 12. Truth unveiled. Rain had transformed into gentle mist by the time Polly's car arrived at Veritas, the upscale restaurant where Leora had arranged her professional dinner with Liam. The establishment's name, Latin for truth, struck Polly as ironically appropriate for the evening's probable revelations. Reception confirmed Liam had arrived 15 minutes earlier and been escorted to a private dining room in the rear. More telling was the additional information that Ms. Lurie requested privacy and no interruptions for the first hour. "I believe my husband is expecting me," Polly stated with calm authority. "Would you direct me to their table?" 3 minutes later, she paused outside the private dining room, voices carrying through the partially open door. Leora's carefully modulated tones suggested practiced sympathy. "It's understandable you feel betrayed," she was saying. "After everything you've invested in this relationship, discovering such deception must be devastating." "If these documents are authentic," Liam's voice replied, tension evident beneath his controlled response. "The timing seems suspiciously convenient given recent circumstances." "I debated whether to show you," Leora continued, "but given your separation and her sudden interest in Davidson's Singapore operations, you deserve to know the truth." Polly chose that moment to enter, noting their positioning with analytical precision. Leora sat beside rather than across from Liam, physical proximity suggesting emotional support. Documents were spread between them, what appeared to be financial records and photographs. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Polly announced, startling both occupants. "Though it seems I've arrived at a pivotal moment in your presentation, Leora." "Polly," Liam straightened, surprise quickly replaced by guarded neutrality. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" She approached the table. "When your secretary personally visits to announce she's taking my husband tonight, it creates certain expectations." "I did no such thing," Leora protested, though her complexion had paled noticeably. "Your exact words were, 'Tonight, I'm taking your husband. If you're brave enough, try and stop me,'" Polly quoted precisely. Quite the dramatic declaration. "What is this about?" Liam demanded, attention shifting between the women. "Apparently the final act in a carefully orchestrated performance," Polly replied, gesturing toward the documents. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, she examined the materials, fabricated financial records suggesting she had diverted company resources, alongside photographs showing her in apparent intimate conversation with Marcus Davidson. "Impressive forgeries," she commented, "though connecting me romantically with Davidson seems uninspired given his recent engagement to Senator Mitchell's son." "These came from a reliable source in financial oversight," Leora insisted. "The irregularities were discovered during routine audit." "Stop," Liam interrupted, his expression hardening as he studied Leora with new awareness. "No financial irregularities were reported in this quarter's audit. I reviewed those findings personally last week. These were discovered subsequently," Leora improvised. "An independent review—" "There was no independent review," Liam stated flatly, "which means these documents were created specifically for tonight's presentation." Silence descended as Leora's careful composure fractured visibly. Polly placed her portfolio on the table, removing a slim dossier. "Perhaps this would be an appropriate moment to share my own findings," she suggested. "A comprehensive investigation into the systematic campaign conducted against our marriage over the past year." For the next 20 minutes, she presented methodical evidence of Leora's manipulations, from the anonymous letters to Summit family members through the fabricated emails and strategic photographs. Bank records confirmed purchases of burner phones. Security footage showed Leora or her cousin mailing packages that arrived on significant dates. IT forensics traced digital manipulations to devices connected to her home network. The pattern became clear once I stopped reacting emotionally and began analyzing strategically, Polly explained. Each manipulation was designed to create maximum impact at vulnerable moments, establishing doubt that would naturally compound over time. Throughout the presentation, Liam's expression transformed from skepticism to shocked recognition. Leora's attempts at denial dissolved against the weight of cumulative evidence, her practiced poise abandoned for increasingly desperate justifications. "You don't understand what I've sacrificed," she finally burst out, addressing Liam directly. "5 years dedicated to your success, your needs, your ambitions. I built my entire existence around you while you remained oblivious to what was directly before you." "What was before me," Liam replied coldly, "was a trusted professional colleague, not a romantic prospect. If you harbored other expectations, they were entirely self-generated." "She'll never understand you as I do," Leora insisted, desperation edging her voice. "The pressures you face, the compromises required, the loneliness at the summit. I've witnessed every aspect of your life, the triumphs and vulnerabilities alike." "What you've witnessed is my professional persona," Liam corrected. "You've never known the person beyond the position, never been invited into that aspect of my life." "Because she interfered," Leora gestured toward Polly. "Before she arrived, we were developing something meaningful." "We were developing a functional professional relationship," Liam stated firmly. "Nothing more. Your actions haven't revealed devotion, Leora, but dangerous obsession and calculated manipulation." Rising from the table, he addressed the shattered remains of her composure. "Your employment at Summit Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately. Security will oversee the removal of your personal items tomorrow. Any company materials in your possession must be surrendered before you leave the premises." "You can't," she began. "Additionally," he continued without acknowledging her protest, "the evidence Polly has compiled will be submitted to legal for review of potential criminal charges. At minimum, a restraining order seems appropriate given the extent of your harassment." The clinical delivery of these consequences seemed to affect Leora more profoundly than emotional confrontation might have. Her calculated existence had relied on manipulating others' emotions while maintaining her own control. Liam's detached professional response stripped away her remaining leverage. "You'll regret this," she declared, gathering her belongings with trembling hands. "Both of you. When the initial satisfaction fades, you'll recognize what you've discarded." After her departure, silence settled between Polly and Liam, the first moment of privacy since their separation. Neither spoke immediately, the weight of recent revelations requiring processing. "I owe you an apology," Liam finally said, his expression reflecting genuine regret. "I dismissed your concerns, allowed manipulated evidence to affect my judgment, accused you of unreasonable suspicion when you were responding to calculated provocations." "We both reacted exactly as Leora intended," Polly acknowledged, "allowing manufactured doubt to override fundamental trust. The responsibility for that failure belongs to both of us." "When did you begin investigating her?" he asked. "After receiving the fabricated emails," Polly explained. "The sophistication suggested access to internal systems that narrowed potential sources considerably. Once suspicion focused on Leora, patterns emerged in previous incidents." "Why not tell me?" "You might have confronted her prematurely," she admitted. "I needed comprehensive evidence, not isolated incidents that could be explained away. More importantly, I needed to understand her endgame, what final manipulation she had planned." Liam regarded the forged documents Leora had presented, shaking his head at their audacity. "Financial misconduct and infidelity, a calculated combination designed to trigger both professional and personal rejection." "She understood your values precisely," Polly observed. Integrity in both contexts represents your core principles. The waiter appeared briefly, quietly ensuring they required nothing before departing. Through the window, Polly noticed the mist had cleared, revealing a night sky where stars competed with city lights for prominence. I spoke with your mother yesterday, Polly mentioned. She reminded me that all marriages face challenges, though ours admittedly arrived in a rather unique form. Liam smiled slightly. Mother always did have a gift for understatement. I'm glad you reached out to her. Mr. Finch also provided valuable perspective, Polly added. His experiences with corporate machinations helped contextualize Leora's tactics. A comfortable silence settled between them, more contemplative than tense. The reintroduction of their support network, Eleanor, Finch, even Davidson in his unwitting role, emphasized what Leora had attempted to isolate them from, the community that recognized and valued their relationship. Where do we go from here? Liam finally asked, the question encompassing far more than their immediate departure. That depends on what remains between us, Polly replied honestly. Leora's manipulations created genuine fractures. Recognizing their source doesn't automatically repair the damage. No, he agreed, but understanding provides foundation for reconstruction, if that's what we both want. Is it what you want? She asked quietly. His response came without hesitation. Yes. These days without you have clarified precisely what matters most in my life, Polly. Not corporate acquisitions or market expansions, but the partnership we've built. Intellectual, emotional, and fundamentally honest, despite Leora's best efforts. The simple sincerity of his declaration bridged much of the distance between them, though Polly recognized restoration would require more than momentary reconnection. I propose we begin again, she suggested, not ignoring what's happened, but incorporating those lessons into a stronger foundation. Trust requires continuous cultivation, not assumption. A practical approach to emotional reconstruction, Liam smiled, analytical even in reconciliation. Would you expect anything less? She returned his smile, reaching for his hand across the table. I would not, he acknowledged, fingers interlacing with hers. It's precisely that combination of emotional honesty and strategic thinking that made me fall in love with you initially, and what makes me certain we can rebuild what Leora attempted to destroy. As they departed the restaurant together, Polly reflected on their journey, from professional colleagues to romantic partners, through manufactured crisis to authentic reconnection. Leora had underestimated not only their individual resilience, but their fundamental compatibility, mistaking temporary fractures for permanent breakdown. Outside, Eleanor waited in her car, having insisted on being nearby should either of them need support following the confrontation. Her approving smile as they emerged together confirmed her faith in their relationship's durability. Beside her sat Mr. Finch, whose steadfast mentorship had provided crucial perspective throughout Polly's professional journey. The secretary's campaign had indeed succeeded in revealing truth, though not the version she intended. Instead, it had exposed the strength of genuine connection against calculated manipulation, proving that partnerships built on mutual respect and shared values could withstand even the most determined attempts at destruction. Tonight, I'm taking your husband. If you're brave enough, try and stop me, Leora had declared in misguided confidence. What she failed to recognize was that true bravery lay not in territorial defense, but in vulnerable honesty, the courage to acknowledge fractures while committing to their repair. As Liam and Polly returned home together, that commitment illuminated their path forward. Not perfect resolution, but genuine determination to rebuild their relationship stronger than before, fortified by shared understanding of both its vulnerabilities and its enduring value.